All right, we're off and running.
Sweet.
You want to tell us who you are?
My name is Tim Collins, former Major League Baseball player, retired, and now focusing on youth development, everything that falls under that umbrella.
Love it. I wanted to start there. And I thought a little bit of a unique take with you now that you have your own kids and kind of watching that evolution probably. And I figured we'll start at youth, like youth, and then maybe we can work all the way up to, high level players. What are your thoughts as a dad in terms of what you try to emphasize either coaching or with your kids?
Having kids is tough when it comes to development. We have 4 kids, and so they're all at such different developmental ages. The biggest thing that we've always emphasized is just letting things kind of, manifest themselves. With my background and my wife's background, she went to JMU for dance, and so people always assumed that our kids were going to be like heavy into sports, heavy into arts, things like that, which they are. Which we always really promote that within our household, but when it came to sports, we always wanted to make sure that it was driven by the kids, and making sure that if it's something that they wanted to do, that we would, make sure that we promoted that, make sure that we put them in a good position to be successful. We never wanted to push sports, but, from a life development sort of thing, I think sports and arts as well is crucial for development, whether it's functional, whether it's mental, whether, it just promotes a lot of healthy development for youth.
Love it. Is there an age, and this doesn't have to be baseball, this can be anything. Is there an age that you think, paying a little more attention to like the technical aspects and getting more hands-on coaching and, that you think is maybe a milestone, or how do you think about that with, I don't know, maybe like late elementary, getting into middle school kind of athletes, kids nowadays?
Yeah, I don't know if there is a right age. I sometimes go back and forth. I have a 3-year-old, and I think, man, should I start doing some, some functional movement stuff with him, hand-eye coordination, things like that. He learns a ton from his older siblings. And so he is incredibly coordinated. We weren't super like pushy with our older kids, especially our 11-year-old. And I remember specifically he went and did coach pitch baseball, and he realized that there was t-ball before that, and he was like, wait, why didn't I play t-ball? And I said, well, you never asked. And so we never wanted to, especially baseball, I never really wanted to push baseball because if that's my background, people expected it. But I really think the kid will sort of present certain things that will allow you to say, okay, maybe we need to take this a step further. And again, I think that is more the kid asking you, hey, can we go do this? Or, hey, can we go do that? Again, I never push our kids to go out in the backyard and say, hey, you have to do 100 swings today. Hey, we got to make 50 throws today. I want them to go do that on their own, because I think that that drive creates a passion for what they're doing, and then that passion turns into hard work at some point. And I think that is self-driven, and I think that light switch kind of turns on at some point where they realize, hey, I really love doing this. Not so much just love playing the sport or love dancing, but I have developed a passion for it, and I'm excited to go do this, and I want to put the work and the effort in to be able to get better at it.
Yeah, what's it been like with technology and kids being more inside versus outside? As a parent, are there certain, are you actively thinking about how you're presenting options to, especially like your older kid, like you were talking about, to kind of, I don't know, keep them engaged? Not to say they have to play sports, but, most people listening are going to have a kid that plays sports, or they themselves play. Are you creatively kind of selling different scenarios to try to encourage that?
Yeah, I mean, the technology is crazy. With iPads, iPhones, things that we sort of started to see at the tail end of our childhood.
Yeah.
It's so prevalent now. And, we homeschool, and tablets are a piece of our homeschooling. For them to be able to go on and do some of the software that we have for homeschooling, we have to have the tablets. But with that, there's games, there's things that they want to do, and they're very addicting. And so we're a family that promotes being outdoors in general. There's so many physical, emotional, developmental benefits of being outdoors, and that is how we push being outside, as opposed to being in front of your tablet or being using technology. We try to give them some education on being exposed to trees and nature, how that benefits their brain and how they function, and how much that would benefit them coming back in and learning and boosting their cognitive response or their ability when it comes to learning. So we're big on getting outside in general.
Love it. And this doesn't have to be now. It doesn't have to be your kids necessarily. But if it's like late middle school, let's use baseball as an example. It's a low-hanging fruit.
Sure.
They're excited about diving in, both from a parent standpoint, from a coaching standpoint. What about like 13, 14 years old? And we can obviously blend this into what you're doing as well. What do you think is important around that age and the example of baseball, let's say, and maybe pitcher development?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that's missing is development. Everything now, when you look at travel ball, any type of sport, specifically baseball, it's all driven around competition. How many tournaments can we get in? And you don't just see that 13, 14 years old. When you're 8, 9, 10 years old, these kids are playing 60, 70 games during the summer.
Yeah.
And that's just travel ball. And you think about rec ball, then you really quickly transition into fall ball and you play more tournaments. And you start to see that these kids who are really good at 9, 10, 11 years old, when they're 13, 14 years old, they're still the same athlete. There's not a whole lot of development happening. And not to say that it's too late, but you really miss these prime years of development where the brain is starting to put the pieces together and tell your body how to move in space. By the time they're 13, 14 years old, they're either burnt out. They're starting to see kids who actually did focus on development get better than them and surpass them. And then that puts them in a position where they're not as confident anymore. Or they used to be the starter and now they're riding the bench, and nobody's there to help them emotionally from the mental side of it and saying, hey, let's not worry about so much being on the bench. Let's worry about some development. Let's focus on some skills specific that could make you better to put you in a position to be a starter again. I think that's one of the biggest things that's missing with sports is, parents, coaches emphasizing competition alone, as really that's what they're paying for, is to go to competitions, which they in turn they think is more exposure. But at some point, when you're not playing every inning and you're going to all these tournaments, exposure means absolutely nothing. So I think there needs to be a turn. Something has to change where the focus is development, skills, one-on-one, clinics, throwing programs, the mental side of it, all things that get missed because of all the competition that kids are playing.
Yeah, I think we talk about this too in terms of, play multiple sports. Mm-hmm. That's also, great to develop all those properties. But again, in the baseball world, as an example, that's all I want to do. I mean, I grew up in the soccer world. All I wanted to do was play soccer 24/7. I didn't want to play other sports necessarily. Is there an in-between there where, we can offer some of that? I mean, we talk about it with, 8th grades when we kind of start working with kids on the training side. For us, it almost fills some of those buckets in terms of movement and trying to make it 3D and just really athletic and focus on that during that time. I think that's how we say that we would fill gaps. Are there creative ways that you can structure things to also fill those buckets on the technical side, the development side related to the skill of either pitching or hitting, and maybe how would you structure that?
I honestly think it's I look at it trying to figure out whether I need to direct this more at coaches or more at parents, but I think at the end of the day, it's what are you going to prioritize more, my child's development or the fact that they're getting to go play in these cool games and get cool uniforms and things like that. I think if I ask every single parent that walks through these doors, what do you want to prioritize, your child's development or making sure they play in a game? Every single one of them is going to say child's development.
Yep.
But push come to shove, there's a whole other world of people on the other side of things that maybe it's money driven. You have a facility and they say, hey, we're going to offer these really cool programs. You got these awesome uniforms. You got all these games. There's going to be so much exposure for your child. That can cloud your judgment when it comes to your child's development, honestly. And I think there just needs to be the narrative needs to change. It needs to be less games, more development. And I think there's a fine balance. There's a fine line that you have to walk when it comes to games and development. And I think you can marry the two. You really have to do that. I think there's certain times of the year that you can prioritize games, and I think there's certain times of the year that you absolutely have to prioritize development. The simplest way that I look at it is, if there's another sport happening during that time, then that other sport probably shouldn't be played at a game level.
Yep.
And I always tell my athletes, if you have football practice and you have a baseball game and it's football season, you should go to football practice.
Yep.
I think long term, that's going to benefit their development far more than going to this baseball game. And it also gives their body the ability to rest from that specific sport. And baseball is such a throwing intensive sport. There's a ton of rotation. Going and playing a different sport, and let's say football, it's very north-south. You have that east-west movement. You're learning different movements from that perspective, and that is just going to make you a much more well-rounded athlete. So when baseball season rolls around, you're going to feel like you're in better shape and more equipped to be a better baseball player just by playing a different sport.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think all of this stuff is, encompassed in the new mentorship that you're throwing out there. Can you talk about that a little bit more and just what that looks like, how you're kind of structuring things to try to do something a little different?
Yeah. For me, it's all in an effort to try to separate myself and what my experience has afforded me to offer. The mentorship is basically, I want to offer athletes the ability to have access to stuff that I've learned over my career and to be able to help them through their journey. I have defied the odds. I'm undersized. I've gone through 2 Tommy John surgeries.
5'4"?
Yeah, 5'4". It's 5'7" for the record. And so for me, I want to be able to. That's my way of giving back to the game. And it starts at the youth level. I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we didn't say that there's a huge, issue with child psychology or the mental side of things nowadays. Whether that's school, whether that's sports, everything. I think there's a huge issue, and I want to be able to, put my knowledge out there to these kids and be able to say, hey, look, I am, I've been where you want to go. Even if you just want to play at the college level or high school level, if you have aspirations to play at the major league level or professional level, I've been there. I know what it takes. I know things that work. I know things that don't work. Whether that's physical, whether that's nutrition, that's mental performance. Those are all things that I can offer to these athletes to be able to assist them in their journey and, hopefully not just create good athletes, but good humans as well.
Totally.
Right? Because at the end of the day, these kids aren't going to be professional athletes, most likely. They're going to be humans far longer than they're ever going to play sports. And so if I look at it from that way, if I'm purely just trying to build good development for sports, then I think I'm missing such a huge piece of the puzzle. So I want to, first and foremost, I want to create good humans. And then if we can develop some skill, if we can develop a healthy mindset for mental performance, nutrition, strength and conditioning, recovery, arm care, all that sort of stuff, those are like the supplemental things.
Yep.
And again, first and foremost, I just want to help create good humans that are going to go off into society and do good things and hopefully pass on the knowledge that they've gained.
Yeah, I think I like to ask about practical examples as well. So let's say you had maybe a sophomore, good player, plays on a good team, has good stuff. Maybe let's say just kind of average velocity, pitches, plays another position. It's end of the summer, and they're going into that, sophomore year, want to have a big year. What are like the big ticket items? Because I also want to kind of hear about maybe like an uncommitted senior as well. But in that, 15, 16-year-old sophomore, what do you prioritize starting when school goes back in the fall in terms of some of those like bigger ticket items that you talked about? And let's say they're a pitcher for the sake of it. How would you maybe go through different phases with that age of athlete?
Well, transitioning from summer to fall, realistically what we're talking about, again, we've got to understand where they are as an athlete, what type of things that we need to prioritize. Do they have the ability to throw strikes? Do they have the ability to, are they good movers? Do we have to, we can always refine movement efficiency. I always say that at least 80% of what we're going to accomplish on the pitching side is done in the weight room. So that's one thing that I always emphasize to those athletes is, hey, are you training? And if they say yes, but are you actually training, right? What does that mean to you? And then identifying the low-hanging fruits, looking at their movements, their mechanics. Are there things that we can pick out and say, hey, let's work on some arm path. I think you're a little bit tense at the wrong times in your movements. Can we create some, do we have to create some hip-shoulder separation? Little things that we can clean up that I think ultimately will help them gain the velocity, but also help them command the baseball a little bit better as well. And then from that standpoint is, hey, when we get into a throwing program, deeper into a throwing program, are there things that we can address from a mindset standpoint? How do we approach certain at-bats? Are we identifying certain swings? Are we actually even like putting into thought, what type of swing that hitter just took, how they fouled the ball off, where that pitch location was, and now I've got to reset and make the next pitch. So that gives me the opportunity to dive into the mental side of the game as well, whether it's, sequencing, identifying hitter swings, things like that. And then, ultimately I think all kids want to add velo, right? I think that's, it's an unnecessary evil, so to speak. I think velo is important at a certain point, but also I think if you miss the ability to teach kids just how to move efficiently, then you're doing them sort of a disservice as they start to develop into a better athlete.
Sure.
And again, I think that goes hand in hand, right? Strength and conditioning, that's your job on your side, is to get them stronger, which innately is going to make them move better, which is going to help them move a little bit more efficiently. So then when they come over to my side, they already have that foundation of strength. They have that foundation of movement, and we can sort of refine those specific things. And then, communicating with you guys and saying, hey, this is what we're trying to work on. How can we marry those two together? I hope that answered your question.
No, that's good. Yeah, because I think what's lost maybe is, and we're hopefully big on this, is worry about your long-term plan for development, move really well, get strong with the fundamental lifts for sure. Also, like, don't get too caught up on, just trying to throw numbers up on a board, to compete with your friends, right? Because that usually creates like the senior that just moves terrible, that's big in the weight room and strong in the weight room, that, is not getting it done on the field, but, we care about. So how does that switch? And it doesn't have to be drastically different, but I'm always curious, like, you have that uncommitted senior, they're going into the fall. Let's say they're a low 80s, guy, and they're cool with, hey, look, I want to get an opportunity at like a really good D3 program, maybe a D2, but they need to develop probably some velocity. Is there a different like risk reward strategy that you would potentially take within how you program, specifically their throwing stuff, especially?
Yeah. They're definitely more of a crunch time sort of predicament there. If they want to go on and play at the college level and they're low 80s, the reality of today is that just isn't going to cut it. That's not what coaches are looking for. Now, they're not far from being what coaches are looking for.
Yep.
And I think what also comes into play is handedness, right? If you're a left-hander that throws mid to upper 80s and you can command the strike zone and you can land your off-speed pitches for strikes, that's appealing to some of these colleges. If you're right-handed and you're mid to upper 80s and you can sort of land your off-speed pitches, maybe it's not as appealing to colleges. But I approach that a little bit differently, right? We have to take a little bit more risk at that point to get the reward. But again, it's not drastically different. I think when you prioritize movement, you start to unlock things that they really already have. So a big thing that I like to do is teach them how to transition from catch play, where they're most relaxed and they're not really thinking about mechanics. We're creating some variability, and then take that to the mound and say, hey, this is all it is. You're just throwing from a slope, right? And a lot of times that sort of unlocks a little bit more out of them. And then couple that with, again, strength and conditioning, getting them stronger. Most kids need to get stronger.
Yep.
Most kids need to be a little bit more aggressive with their training.
Yep.
And that's why I say, when I ask them, are you training? They say yes, but are you actually training,
Yep.
right? So training isn't, 2-3 days a week. When you're a senior and you're trying to go play in college, you need to be in here 5 days a week.
Yep.
You need to be doing everything that you possibly can to get stronger, to get faster, to be more physical. And ultimately, that's going to give you greater output when you go to throw. But for me, I'm trying to get them to understand that, when we transition from catch play to mound work, nothing changes. And for most players, most pitchers, it absolutely changes. They go from a thrower to now I have to pitch. And that sort of seizes them up, right? And then you start to see these guys who play shortstop, they make these unbelievable throws, or they play the outfield and they crow hop and they cut it loose and they carry the ball from center field all the way to home plate, 240 feet. And it's like, where's that on the mound, right? So my philosophy as a player, for me personally, it was always, I know I can carry the ball 300 plus feet. Can I carry that ball 300 plus feet with the catcher sitting at 60 feet, 6 inches?
Yep.
So I always had that mindset is I'm going to throw this ball 300 feet. The catcher's just going to stop it, right? So getting guys to understand, you need to understand how to transition from catch play, which is to me where you're most relaxed and you're athletic, to the mound, and nothing changes, and that's where your true potential really starts to show.
Yeah, is there something, you alluded to it when we talk about this same player and they say they've been working, been in the weight room, I've been hitting my throwing program. What are they typically missing, right? Or are there like subtle things in terms of whether it's the mental side of things, structure, I would say, sometimes maturity that goes with that. When they kind of describe to you what they're doing, what do you hear? And you're like, I don't buy into that.
Yeah. I think most athletes are going to give you their perspective that's probably not really close to reality.
Yep.
I always say when you think you're working hard, you're probably like, you could probably put 20% more in.
Yep.
Right. And that goes, as finite as like, hey, I just did, 60s on the dumbbell bench. Do you think I could go up? Well, how was it? Were you able to get all your reps? Yeah. Well, you could probably at least 20% more,
Yep.
right? You can push yourself a little bit more, and that, you can look at that from a 10,000 foot view and say, am I able to do more? That's not going to jeopardize my, it's not going to, overly fatigue me. It's not going to hinder my recovery. I'm going to feel good the next day. And I'm going to be able to accomplish what I want to accomplish the next day. Most athletes in general can do more. I think the tough part becomes their schedule, right? They're in school, they're doing all the extracurriculars, they have games, they have practices, they play multiple sports, which is all, life. But at the end of the day, it's, if you're at a point where you're prioritizing a specific sport, okay, maybe we need to do a little bit more in that respect. Maybe we need to do a little bit more on the development side. We absolutely need to be in the gym at least 5 days a week.
Yep.
The nutrition is huge. Sleep is one thing that's sorely missed with high school kids, middle school kids. And then the structure. I think if kids don't have a rigid structure to follow, they typically stray from what they're going to do.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And so if you leave a kid to their own devices, they're going to choose the easy path over the hard path, and 9 times out of 10, maybe 10 out of 10. And so having the structure, and what I love so much about facilities like you is that there's accountability.
Yep.
When kids walk through the door, they understand, hey, you're going to be in here. You have an hour. You got to get your work done. We're going to be there to push you. We're going to be there to help you. I think that's huge for kids in their development. When it comes to throwing, when it comes to arm care, when it comes to all the mundane, boring stuff, that's hard to push yourself.
Totally.
Nobody is going to push themselves through their arm care routine every day. Nobody's going to push themselves through, hey, maybe I need to get an extra 1,500 calories in. Nobody's going to push themselves to do that. And so having some sort of structure, and this is something that I aim to do with my mentorship program, is big for these kids. Structure is huge. ADHD is prevalent.
Yep.
Right. I have it. I mean, I'm a diagnosed ADHD kid, and so I understand. I know how hard it is to stay on task. I know how hard it is to say, hey, I'm going to go spend 45 minutes to do my arm care routine.
Yep.
Within 20 minutes, I'm going to find myself in a conversation somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge piece to it, is the structure, the accountability, understanding that, hey, I'm here for you. There are people that are here for you that are going to help you and help foster this development so that you can be everything that you want to be. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Right? That's life. But I think there's something to be said about, having the mentor in your life to say, hey, push come to shove, I'm here for you. Any question you have, I'm here. Anything that you need from me, I'm going to be there to push you, to help you get through that time.
Yeah, as we take it to the next level, maybe this will kind of be the final line of questioning, and I'll let you get out of here. When it comes to, look, a good high school player, but certainly like college players as well, what do you, and this is the course of your career, like what separates the really good, great ones, and especially like at the big league level, outside of just the freaks, what creates staying power, at that level? And what have you learned?
Consistency. I mean, to me, that's the biggest thing. I was a stickler for consistency. I mean, you know me. I was at the gym 6 days a week. I would have been there 7, but they were closed on Sundays.
Yep.
I was there from morning till the night, and I'd eat my breakfast, lunch, and dinner there. I became a staple at the facility. And the regular clients, the everyday clients that would come in, they knew who I was. It was almost expected that I was there.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't, it was like, well, where did he go?
Yeah.
I needed that sort of structure to stay on task. I knew that if I spent all day at the gym, that I was going to get my work in, I was going to get my throwing in, I was going to get my food in. It was my sort of safe spot to be able to say, I know I'm doing everything that I possibly can. So back to the main point, the biggest thing is consistency. small wins over time, right? If you, work really hard for a week and then take 2 weeks off, it's not going to stick.
Yep.
And as you start to progress through the college ranks, the professional ranks, and ultimately getting to the big leagues, that becomes more and more important, right? I always say, it's not just about getting to the big leagues. It's not just about getting to professional baseball. What are you going to do to separate yourself from everybody else in that room to stay? And that's so important at the big league level. And equally, I think maybe equally as important at the professional level in general. There's so many people that are coming for your job.
Yep.
I witnessed this. I had this personally, right? I had gone through some injuries. There's always people that are going to come up behind you and take your job or try to take your job. And what are you going to do on a daily basis, not only to get a little bit better, but to separate yourself from everybody else? And to me, that's consistency in the weight room, consistency with your routine, your nutrition, your sleep, your recovery. It all comes down to, are you willing to do the boring stuff over and over and over and over again until you absolutely it's muscle memory.
Yep.
It's muscle memory. And that's really what it all comes down to. I think that's what separates the big leaguers from minor leaguers from collegiate players, college players to high school players, is their ability to stay consistent in their work ethic. And then, like you said, you have those top 1% people, like the Hall of Famers that they just unconsciously get better every year, or they just unconsciously stay really good every year. But for the other 99%, that's the reality. Is you need to be the best at what you do every single day, regardless of what anybody else is doing, and just stay consistent. And more often than not, that works out.
Love it. Yeah, we always talk about that in business. It's like most businesses go under within 3 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I think most people have good, solid business ideas. They execute on it reasonably well, but it's really hard to work 100 hours a week, year after year after year, and have that same level of detail and attention to what you do. So yeah, just taking pride in that day to day and making sure that, you're doing, if you're going to do it to the best of your ability, obviously.
Absolutely.
Do it for a long time.
Yeah. That's the only way to do it.
Love it. All right, Tim. Thanks. We appreciate it. Any final words of wisdom here for the people?
Yeah. Follow me on Instagram.
Yeah. Follow him. What's the handle?
Tim Collins 55.
Yeah, you probably got more than us already. So
Yeah. Follow me on Instagram, please.
All right. Follow him. Thanks, dude.